Good morning, everybody. This is Editor Taylor chiming in. I wanted to start off in a particularly Jasonian fashion, and that is with an apology. Jason and I had gotten together to record this session at 4:30 in the morning about a week ago, the only time he and I both were available to talk, but I guess the coffee hadn't kicked in yet because I, in a fit of silliness, forgot to put my microphone down and recorded on a single channel avenue. So my voice was super quiet, his voice was audible. I've manipulated the waves, I have fixed that. I believe the sound quality is definitely salvageable, but it is not up to my usual par. So please enjoy the episode and forgive me for my misgivings. Next time I will stick to recording during the daylight hours. Happy Christmas, everybody. Welcome back to a special episode of the Cleric Swear Ring Mail podcast. The holiday season is upon us, and I don't know about your family, but in mine, one of the key things that ties the holiday together is holiday film and watching those holiday films around the fire with your family. So, who better to talk to about film and film tradition than the one, the only Anchor Sari himself, Jason of Nerds Variety Cast. How are you doing this morning, Jason?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing about as bright as I can. It is a dark and early morning, and I am excited to talk about holiday films, or at least films that we dot our holidays with. So,
I'm very happy that you invited me to join you for this. When we talk about holiday films, and here we're kind of mainly talking about Christmas films, there's really three categories of films, the way I see it, and I'll be interested to get your take on this. But you have films that are actually about the Nativity, the birth of Christ, which would be like, and there aren't really that many, but you might have like VeggieTales, The Little Drummer Boy, right? And then we have films that are about Christmas, the holiday, whether that's the secular holiday or the religious holiday. And here you could have a Charlie Brown Christmas, you could have, The Best Little Christmas Pageant Ever, things like that. Although arguably the Best Little Christmas Pageant Ever, Loretta Swit TV movie, probably straddles those first two categories. And then your third category would be movies that happen during Christmas, but aren't necessarily about Christmas. And this would be every Shane Black movie ever, from Lethal Weapon to Iron Man 3, and of course Die Hard, and all these other movies that occurred during that season.
But I do think the listeners will agree that Lethal Weapon is probably the most important Christmas movie ever made. So
I'm sure there's a big contingent out there of Die Hard fans that would argue with you there. I think Die Hard may have that. Although neither of those are my favorite action Christmas movie, but we'll come to that later on.
We'll come to that later, and then I will forego my joke of I will have them call in, and then I'll bring you back on to disagree.
Oh, we can do that. Yeah,
that'll be fun. So we'll see what happens. So how about I will let you kick it off. You are my special guest. Thank you for coming. And how about if you would like, you can kick it off with your first holiday film of the season.
Okay. And so when this was initially pitched, when we talked about it, we talked about movies that were traditions that we watched every year. And so that's kind of influenced my list here, and I've cheated a little bit. But this first one definitely gets watched every year, and that's A Charlie Brown Christmas. And A Charlie Brown Christmas is a 65 animated, yes, TV special. Yeah, it's half an hour, but I consider it in here because it's a holiday tradition.
The Grinch is half an hour, so half an hour is a valid one.
Yeah. And I think A Charlie Brown Christmas really, it really hits a lot of great notes in there. People talk about the commercials. Yeah, can't say the word. How Christmas has been turned into a commercial thing and a secular holiday, all this kind of thing. and which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because when you actually look at, and I guess when we say Christian, you have to air quotes a little bit because there's so many different beliefs, and yeah, it's such a huge tent. But I think most would probably agree that your most important Christian holiday or feast day would be Pascha or Easter here in the West, where somebody that's not familiar with Christianity would think it's Christmas just because of how commercial Christmas is. Yeah. Which started probably in the mid-19th century with the first Christmas card, when the whole commercial thing started rolling. But Charlie Brown Christmas in '65 tried to fight against this some. And that's kind of a big push of it. What is Christmas really about? And, we even have, we have a Bible reading in there. We have, we have some great things in Charlie Brown Christmas, great music. And it reaches out. One thing it does that a lot of other children's shows didn't do is you actually had kids voicing the characters. And we have a main character, Charlie Brown, who a lot of people can identify with. And doesn't, I don't know if he ever wins, really. I mean, he's always, but that's where it's actually reaching out to giving kids something they can identify with, So, yeah, so Charlie Brown Christmas is definitely my number one thing, and it's definitely watched every year.
Yep. We've watched it at least once this year. The film, I don't know if it's legal or not, but the film is up on several streaming platforms in chunks, so we've watched it on stream. The boys like the singing, the boys like the musical parts, and then when they start talking, my twin toddlers run off and do something else. But last year, we couldn't even get them to stare at the screen, so it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it is. If people have Apple TV, Apple has picked up all the main movies. So, Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, and It's Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown Christmas. All those are on Apple TV. And actually they're on there for free, which you can get Apple TV on other streaming. Like I have a Roku hooked up to my TV, and we have Apple TV on that. And so and the Charlie Brown movies are free on there. So you might have to create an account with Apple.
Oh, nice.
But there's no cost.
That's fun. So maybe I didn't pirate it after all. So
there you go.
I'm very big on Christmas as faith and family in that order, so I'm a big fan of that film. I especially like the highlight where they kind of frame Linus reading scripture. So that was something that, if I remember correctly, I was trying to look up some trivia for the film before we were talking about it, but I was unable to find this verified. Tell me if you've heard this. The producers actually pushed back against it, and the author, Charles Shultz, he had to push very hard to keep the scripture in the film. The producers and the network that produced it wanted to embrace the secular and to try to make a fun kids movie. And Charles Schultz had, like you said, intentionally had to fight and keep the movie on message for where he wanted to go.
That's yes. I've heard that before and read that before, that was a big. It was quite controversial. Which I mean, you would think it's funny because we look back at now. The '60s. Well, that was a very conservative time. Well, actually, at least as far as mainstream goes, right? I mean, obviously, you had the counterculture movement, you had the hippies, you had all kinds of things happen during the '60s, really. But people think of it, but really, and actually, here's a quote here. In the '60s, and there's a quote off of Wikipedia, the Wikipedia page for Charlie Brown Christmas, but during the production part of that, but it says in the '60s, fewer than 9% of television Christmas episodes contained a substantial reference to religion. And Schultz, like he wanted to be about nativity. He wanted to be about, what this feast day is supposed to be about. And so he pushed for that. And it ended up being, I don't know how it was received initially. Of course, now it's a big hit in a tradition. But I was trying to look here, and it's obviously riveting when we're looking things up during the broadcast.
Well, no, it has.
But it did get positive reviews after it was shown. It looks like, and it was well received. But yeah, he did have to fight to include the
The scripture,
the faith part's in there. Yeah, the reading and all in there. Yep.
which makes sense, because if you think about it, the Christmas holiday falls at the end of the fourth quarter, and so if we want to wrap up in the black for the year, we have to try to encourage sales. So that's probably where that comes from. But more importantly, there is a second Charlie Brown film that I seem to remember that came out in 1992. The It's Christmas Time Again, Charlie Brown. Have you seen that one?
I don't think I have. So my Charlie Brown, I did see that in there. I think there's another one too. I think there are a number of Peanuts Christmas specials out there. But to be honest, my watching of TV and things dropped off some. So I went. So I watched a lot in the '80s, and then I went in the Army, and then obviously dropped off quite a bit.
They don't do Charlie Brown in the Army? Yeah, you don't say.
Well, it's not that they don't, but my
makes sense.
My watching kind of dropped off. So, but yeah, so I have not seen that one. I've and my go-to are all the older ones.
That makes sense. Sure. So you say that a friend of mine. The reason I bring up the newer one is that the newer one, despite being made, so Charles Shultz passed in the year 2000, but so he's been gone for a while. But the Peanuts It's Christmas Time Again came out in '92, so Shultz was alive. So I don't know if he was the writer, but this newer special seems to avoid the same religious overtone. There's still a religious element in that it's the Christmas holiday, but it's to quote the Holiday Hound, a reviewer on IMDb. The original Christmas special incorporated religious themes, which was expected to sink its ratings. That never happened. The latest version avoids such ties and seems to reflect Schultz's own journey towards humanism, which he himself acknowledged. By casting off the deeper emotional and cultural underpinnings, it was inevitable that what would result would be a less classic holiday special. So I think Holiday Hound, thank you for your very well written quote. The religious theme is what made the movie stick. I think that's what made it stick out. So I can vouch. There's actually a Peanuts YouTube channel, and it puts out new content all the time and tries to make you subscribe to, I think, a premium version. But it has a couple Christmas things that were, I think, direct to YouTube, which we watched for a while. I turn on the electric babysitter, that is our smart TV, and we let the boys just go for a while. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but I agree with you. I think the 65 version was a diamond, and it is the special one out of the bunch. So.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, were we going to go back and forth, or do you want me to go down my list?
Nah, we'll go back and forth. That'll keep the listeners engaged, and we'll jump into my first pick. So my first pick for the holiday season is an equally embedded part of Americana, something that's very part of the spirit of the holiday for people on this side of the Atlantic. A film called Rare Exports. My wife bought me this one. Jason's laughing because he's seen it. The film, spoiler-free synopsis, the film takes place in the Korvatunturi Mountains. That is in Lapland. It's the border between Finland and Russia, where the entire film is in Finnish, so the film is dubbed. And the premise is an archaeological dig, led by an American, humorously enough, is going on in the Russian side of the border, or just over the border from Russia, and a young sheep herder discovers a dark secret that they found under the ice, in the form of naked bearded men running through the woods. So that's spoiler free, isn't it, Jason?
But yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would stop there. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting movie. It's a a different take on Christmas. It's actually really well done. I quite enjoyed it. When it came out. Now this came out in like 2010. I probably saw it the following year, but it became among horror. It's not. I don't. It would probably be classified as a horror movie to some degree. So and those are the circles I heard of it. Where I first heard about it was through horror circles. But it's definitely on the lighter side of horror circles of horror movies.
Sort of a mix of holiday and horror. So we found it. We had a group of friends in college, and 2010 we were still in Georgia, and so we were still talking to them. We had a friend who really enjoyed watching B movies and other mystery science theater bait, and so she went online and she found this, and we picked it up from. I can't remember if we picked it up from Amazon directly or if we picked it up from there was a shop called the Video Warehouse that had a big B movie section, and I found they no longer exist, which makes me sad. But so we found this, we took it home, and it was funny enough. It was funny enough that in its own way that it became part of our holiday. So.
Yeah. We don't watch it. It's been a couple of years since I watched it. It's probably time to rewatch it, but it's definitely it's a fun movie.
It is, and it's one of the ones that I may actually not get to watch this year because our DVD player. I famously joke. One of my children fed it a cookie. It no longer opens. So I still need to buy a new DVD player to get back to these. The only way I've been able to watch Christmas movies this year is in the back of our family car. So with the boys back there, we've been limited to Chipmunks and some Christmas Carol incarnations in the Sesame Street Christmas special, but I digress. The important part is, do you, the listener, want to find out what happens with naked bearded men in the wilderness speaking Finnish? Watch Rare Exports: A Christmas Tale. And I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. I'll do a rapid fire of movies that almost made this list at the end. Since we were just talking about one before we started recording, but I actually bumped that off my list, and we'll leave the listeners suspense, because when we talk about movies that are watched every year, I'm going to replace it with The Thin Man. Now, The Thin Man's a 1934 movie. It stars William Powell and Myrna Loy as Nick and Nora Charles.
Not to be confused with that video game character that scares people in the woods. So, very different film.
Yep, very, very much. This is a movie that was actually based on a novel written by Dashiell Hammett, who wrote like The Maltese Falcon and all those. But the Thin Man is basically, you have this husband and wife detective team who are drinking their way through solving mysteries, and it was a really big hit. And there's like 6 of these things as they go on. The first 3 are worth watching, then they get they lower in quality after that. The Thin Man of the title is actually the victim in this movie. It's not the main character. It's not William Powell. It's actually the guy that gets killed. But later on, the name becomes identified with Nick Charles, who's the detective. It's just a fun series of watching these two. It's just one of these. The banner back and forth between this married couple's great. Like I say, as they're going through, and multiple times, William Powell talked about how this detecting and this murder thing is getting in the way of his drinking. He's a retired detective who married Nora, who's rich, and actually she's presented fairly positively through most of this, for a 30s film. For people that get tied up around things like that about the way people portrayed in older movies, this actually does a pretty good job.
Waiter, will you serve the nuts? Will you serve the guests?
Yep. Yeah, just lots of great one-liners, back and forth, rapid fire. And they have a really great rapport between them. You have a great dog in there. If you're into dog, Skippy, who was a really famous dog actor
I was actually
was in this.
I was going to bring that up if you didn't. It's my favorite actor in the film.
Hmm.
Asta, the wire
Yep.
fox terrier, playing Skippy, retired in 1941, believed to be probably 2 or 3 years old at the time of filming. So.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So if you haven't seen this, if there are people out there that won't watch black and white movies for whatever reason, they're missing out. But so the caveat I'll give is it opens up with the mystery, and actually you don't watch this movie for the mystery; you watch it for the interpersonal relations between Nick and Nora. So just get through the first 5 minutes or so where it's doing the mystery part. If you don't really catch what's going on with the plot, it doesn't really matter. It just get through that till you get to the main characters, and then enjoy the ride. But all these films had, some mystery set up. They get drawn into it. They drink their way through solving it, and then at the end they do the scene where they get everybody together around a table or all the suspects in a room and do the big thing where they slowly eliminate people until the guilty one pops out and says, "Oh, I'm it."
Something that Clue, 50 years later, would take a nod from.
Right. Yeah. Notable in this, other actors notable in this, Cesar Romero, who did the Joker and the the Adam West Batman. He's in this movie, and actually Jimmy Stewart's in the next, the sequel to this.
Huh. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Jimmy Stewart of what's the one where he wishes he'd never been born? Fame.
Oh well, yeah. Is that's not Miracle? That's It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful film, one which apparently does not make my list enough because I had forgotten the name of it. But that is a good film in its own regard. Wonderful Life, if only because it was made. They almost did not allow Jimmy Stewart in that film because he had, prior to filming, so that film was a close after World War II film. Jimmy Stewart quit Hollywood and volunteered to serve in World War II and led a bomber squadron. And when he came back, he had severe post-traumatic stress disorder from the experience. And so It's a Wonderful Life is credited as being one of his best performances because as his character's life is falling apart, it's not acting. He's channeling his dealing with his own demons into the celluloid. So it's a phenomenal performance, and that's one of the reasons that it's one of the most memorable, and truthfully one of the most referenced Christmas films. So It's a Wonderful Life. A lot of television shows, Chipmunks in specific is the one I'm thinking of, do a version of It's a Wonderful Life with their own cast. Famously, make sure to ring a bell this Christmas because every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings.
Right. And yeah, it definitely belongs on the list. People should watch it. It's a great movie. Stewart's, of course, a great actor. And you mentioned, yeah, he was a colonel in the U.S. Army Air Force. He did active real bombing runs. He wasn't just a actor that was there, for looks. He actually stayed in the Air Force Reserve afterwards, finally retiring as a major general in 1985. He was one of your few, although there were more back then, he was one of the few Republicans in Hollywood, him and John Wayne. But yeah, Stewart was actually a legitimate war hero and a great actor. He's of course in so many films. It's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington being a sentimental favorite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep. John Wayne did not serve in the military.
Correct.
He had an exemption because he was a single father. I believe. I'd have to look that up. I should probably look things up before I say them. But I do remember his exemption was because he had dependent children that no one else could take care of. But he did.
He actually, so he actually wanted. You're right. He did not serve. He wanted to hook. So he was buddies with John Ford, right? Mm-hmm. And did a lot of movies. John Ford. He wanted to, and Ford during World War II he worked for the government making whatever, war films, propaganda films for the service members, stuff like that, right? And he and John Wayne wanted to do that, and in fact he also made an application with the OSS which was, of course, the precursor to the CIA. But he never was able to do either of those things. Neither of those worked out.
So he was by no means not a patriot. It just he just served in a different way. Much the same can be said of Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was just too young for World War I and just too old for World War II. However, Bing was actively involved with the USO, and he was credited as being the single most important, from a survey of GIs, Bing Crosby was the single most important thing for their morale throughout the conflict. So there are certainly entertainers and celebrities from that epoch who had a very positive impact on the outcome, whether they were directly involved, like James Stewart, or not. So.
Right. Yeah, 100%. But anyway, the Thin Man movies are definitely worth checking out. Definitely, like say, the first three. The first one, even if initially you're like, "What am I watching?" Get past that first initial bit, and I think it'll the charm of it will take you away.
Yeah, and it's identifiable. They're drinking their way through problems, just like the viewer at home.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So, and there is Jason with another true classic, and so let's see. I'll move in. I'm going to skip my middle pick, so I'll try to get some street cred. Emmett the Otter's Jug Band Christmas. Raise your hand, listener, if you've seen this one. The spoiler-free premise: a poor otter family. This is, of course, Emmett the Otter is directed by Jim Henson, starring some of his usual crew, including Frank Oz, who also played Cookie Monster in the original Sesame Street. I can't think of anything else that he was in, but hopefully the listener will recognize. But yeah, so the family of otters, mother and son, live in poverty, and they risk everything on a competition to try to win $50, a massive prize. So the first thing that comes to mind watching this film is the second part of what Christmas means is family. This is a very, very family-friendly film. My 2-year-olds loved this movie. There's a lot of singing, there's a lot of puppets, and it's actually, I think, very technically well done. So there's a scene where the otters are rowing a rowboat down a river, but they're puppets, and so there's a lot of technical expertise that went into this film, a lot of camera tricks, because this was made long in the 1970s, long before computers had taken over some of the animation, some of the touch-ups. And so, looking up some trivia, this film was posited by Jim Henson as an experiment. They wanted to see if they could actually execute some of those technical tasks. So this was just prior to the big Muppet movie. So the arguably the apex of the Muppets as a franchise is the original Muppet movie, and this film was a way for Henson and crew to figure out, can we actually make that big movie? And what they did, I think they pulled it off, one, but two, they came out as with a honest to goodness classic, a perfect juxtaposition of the secular world versus family. So and a wholesome film, a genuinely wholesome film that was able to keep my kids' attention. So.
Yeah, great movie. Unfortunately, originally it had an introduction by Kermit the Frog, who also narrated some scenes. Some of those things are now cut in. The Muppets have been sold to Walt Disney, and which, I mean, the plus of that is now if you have Disney Plus, you can watch the Muppet Show, the original Muppet Show. All but 2 episodes are up there, which is great, and the movies and all are up there, which are great. Like the Muppet Christmas Carol, which I'll come back to in a second. But unfortunately, some of these Kermit scenes are still gone from this. In the DVD releases and whatnot, it's actually missing things from the '77 original, which is kind of a shame. The other thing I'll point out here is a lot of the songs are done by Paul Williams, and that's a name, if people don't know, they should know. Paul Williams is an amazing songwriter, wrote tons of things that you would definitely recognize. You've also seen him on the screen as Little Enos in Smokey and the Bandit and as Swan in Phantom of the Paradise. And if you haven't seen those two movies, you definitely should. But let's circle back to Muppets. So yeah, this definitely falls. It's a well. So the Jug Band is like you say, it's a great family movie, and it's entertaining. It's something that sucks you in. It's kind of a twist on the Gift of the Magi, right, to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But this kind of leads our way when we talk about Muppets to Muppet Christmas Carol, which is arguably should be on everybody's list as well.
Yep, starring Michael Caine, who
Mm-hmm.
I will claim as my favorite Scrooge ever.
Yeah, Muppet. I don't know. I don't know if I maybe. I Yeah, I don't. That's a tough one. Michael Caine does a great job. There's no question about that.
Well,
I
I will say none of the other Scrooges throw a crumpled up Christmas wreath at a singing bunny puppet.
that's true. Alistair Sim in the 51 version does a great job. He made and he's that 51 Christmas Carol is the one which act is the one I watched maybe the most. So that he may be my favorite, but this is my favorite version of the story though. The A Muppet Christmas Carol is super duper close. Believe it or not, even though you have Muppets in here, even though Gonzo is the narrator, Gonzo is Charles Dickens in this, but effectively. But even with all the Muppets and all the shenanigans, this is super close to the actual, to the actual story that Charles Dickens wrote. They lift lines and they lift dialogue straight from the story. They don't dumb it down, and it's super well done. And there are parts in here. You go from very lighthearted for kids with the Muppets to some actually serious, maybe not scary, but ominous parts of this movie. They really do a good job bouncing back and forth in the tone.
They do, and they keep to the spirit of the film, which is
Mm-hmm.
something a lot of Christmas carols fail to do. To put one of the things you have to do when you're remaking a story that's been told so many times is that you have to put something in it to make yours stick out. For example, my father, his favorite Christmas carol is The Stingiest Man in Town. And 1956, so only a couple years after yours, Jason, it was actually a television special that was on NBC at the time. And it originally aired in '56. My dad wouldn't be born for another few years, but it would re-air going forward enough for him to see. Some of the narration being done by the Four Lads, a quartet of vocalists, and starring Basil Rathbone, if I remember correctly. It tells the story of A Christmas Carol, but it does so from the wrong perspective. So in The Stingiest Man in Town, it's a musical. The point is to sing, but it's talking about how Scrooge should be more generous. He doesn't spend money. He's too stingy. That's not where Charles Dickens was going, and that's not what the spirit of Christmas is about. The spirit of Christmas is about generosity. The spirit of Christmas is the only time of the year where you can give gifts to other people, you can think about other people, and it's culturally expected of you. So if in June I buy a care package and put it on a neighbor's doorstep, people think I'm insane. If I do it in December, then I'm being thoughtful, and they'll reciprocate the favor. So the Muppets Christmas Carol does a very good job of capturing the generosity that surrounds it, because doubling back to faith and family, the Christmas is important because we give gifts to each other to celebrate the gift that was given to us according to scriptural doctrine. And that generosity is what's supposed to roll off on us. And to quote one of the songs in the film, the message, if we hear it, is to make it last all year.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And that's the key, is we take the generosity, the love, the see that we can feel for our fellow human beings this time of year and apply it to the rest of our lives. And that is where Charles Dickens was going. He wanted you to see other people regardless of their position in life. If they were a lamplighter, if they were a chimney sweep, if they were a business mogul, they were all human and they were all image bearers of the divine. Also, Muppet Christmas Carol, that was in an interview with Brian Henson, that was a much needed film for morale on the set of Henson Studios. That was the first major film or the first major project that Henson's studios did after Jim Henson had passed away. So they weren't sure if they were going to be able to pull it off without his je ne sais quoi on the side. And Brian Henson, Jim's son, can be quoted in that documentary as saying that this is his favorite Muppet movie ever. And the reason for it is because they were able to pull off what he considered a very well done film and what has become a family classic in the spirit and in dedication to his dad, Jim Henson, who is the progenitor of the Muppets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a classic. And like I say, it's by far my favorite version of the Christmas Carol. It's funny you mentioned the stingiest man in town. To minor yeah, minor
divergence.
Yeah, minor divergence here. But to me, and this will turn off your listeners, but when I think of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, I don't think of Peter Jackson. I think of Rankin and Bass, and I think of Ralph Bakshi. And I think of
if anybody doesn't think of Ralph Bakshi, I'm okay with them being turned off.
Yeah, the 70s versions of those are my go-tos. Well, Rankin and Bass did in '78. They redid The Stingiest Man in Town as an animated special with, get this, Walter Matthau as Ebenezer Scrooge, and it was told. Well, the main narrator here is actually an insect named Bah Humbug, who's voiced by Tom Bosley, the father from Happy Days.
You know, I have seen that, but I did not realize either of those voice actor credits. So I think the Stingiest Man in Town, the Rankin and Bass version, is I believe on YouTube, just kind of hanging out. And I remember I watched that with my on my dad's television, on my dad's smart TV. I turned it on, thinking I had found something special for him, and he got a chuckle out of it. So. That's fun. I did not realize that. I'd forgotten the Rankin and Bass connection there. That's interesting to know.
Which, mentioning animate, I guess we should give a minor nod to other animated things like your Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that whole series with the not quite claymation, but but they all go together, right? And these are all, I believe, Rankin and Bass. So you have the Frosty the Snowman, the Rudolph. You have the ones with Heat Miser and what's this? What's the cold one? Was it Frostbite? You know the two that sing with Mother Nature.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Cold Miser. I'm Mr. Snow. Do. Yep.
Yeah, those are all, of course, classic Christmas.
Yep. Great. It's a fun movie. It's a fun movie to watch, and it's a good one for the little guys. I haven't shown that one to my little guys actually. I wonder if they'll do for that. I'm actually wearing my so recall the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the Bumble. I'm wearing my Bumble shirt. I know the listeners, you can't see this, and I think Jason, you can't see this either because I never turned on my video for the call. But I am wearing this is my favorite Christmas shirt. It's just a blue shirt with a giant bumble smiling bumble head on it, and why is it my favorite shirt? That was the shirt I was wearing when I wheeled my wife out of the recovery room into the infant ICU for her to meet our little boys for the first time in 2018. She gave birth on December 11th, but she was unable to meet the boys until December 12th or 13th because she had had a very rough C-section. And so I was wearing that shirt. I had a little turtleneck on underneath it because the hospitals are cold apparently, and we rolled her in and she got to meet her little boys for the first time. And so that is without question my favorite Christmas t-shirt.
Excellent.
So
Yeah, I don't have a favorite Christmas shirt, but if I did, it wouldn't match that story. That's for sure.
I've got a new kid coming in February. We'll have to put on a Christmas shirt for that. We'll do a simulcast.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. So I think that was my Emmett the Otter. Jason, you're up. What's another good one?
Well, let's talk about some of these action movies. And of course, a lot of people are going to go to Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. Some people may even, but we forget these other ones out there. So I'm going to go to Chuck Norris. So Chuck Norris has two, one pretty good movie and one B movie, schlocky movie. So the first one that's not horrible is A Force of One from 1979. And in A Force of One, we're set in, I think it's San Francisco is where they're set. I should know that. But anyway, it's in San Francisco or LA. But they're out there, and it's set during Christmas, and somebody's killing these narcotics officers. And they decide that, well, maybe they're using karate to kill them. So they go to a local dojo, and Chuck Norris is there teaching. And he gets roped in the investigation and tries to help them find this karate killer. And it's not into Christmas like these other movies we're talking about. Christmas is just the backdrop. But it's a pretty watchable film. It's a serviceable, detective story with Chuck Norris running around doing his karate. The other one that he did that's a Christmas movie, and this is just a schlocky fun movie, of course, is 1985's Invasion USA, where we have one of the great screen villains of all time, Richard Lynch, who leads an invasion force of communists, mainly Latin American guerrillas, but also some Eastern Europeans. But he brings them into the U.S. and they run around blowing up houses and attacking shopping malls and doing all kinds of crazy things. And of course, the U.S. government is helpless to stop them. So Chuck Norris is brought out of retirement to take them out, and he runs around with two mini Uzis, a mini Uzi under each arm, and he's takes out this terrorist army by himself. But have you seen either of these movies?
Yep, I think I have in the long past. The fun factoid though, in the UK release of Invasion USA, they were robbed of 10 seconds of footage. Thankfully, from what I'm reading, the cuts were restored in 2004, but between 1985 and 2004, an unacceptable 10 seconds were missing, and you had to be in the U.S. in order to see, in particular, two scenes. One where you have a woman snorting cocaine through a straw, but two where there are some bullet impacts directly to the groin. So two very important Christmas staples.
Yeah, that's Richard Lynch's the bad guy's signature move. He does that actually to two different characters throughout the movie. Rostov is his character's name. Invasion USA is not a good movie, but it's a let's put that out there. So Chuck Norris has some good movies. His earlier career, actually, I mean, it depends what you consider good, but his earlier career, I think, is pretty good when he's doing his karate movies and all. But once we hit probably up to Lone Wolf McQuade, and then after Lone Wolf McQuade, it really kind of goes downhill.
Yeah.
The missing in action movies, while poignant, are overacted and not very good. Delta Force are what they are, and then of course we really go downhill with things like Invasion USA. And once we get in the Walker Texas Ranger era, gets off the rails.
I remember my Bad Movie Club watched Lone Wolf McQuade, and Lone Wolf McQuade makes for a bad movie night. There's nothing to make fun of. We like to watch, or liked. I don't get to hang out with them anymore. We liked to watch films that you could make fun of with your friends. That was the joy of B movies for us. Lone Wolf McQuade doesn't provide very much ammunition on that regard. The movie just kind of goes, and then I picked up one of the missing in action movies. I say I picked it up. My dad gave it to me, and then I picked it up from under the Christmas tree. But it's still in shrink wrap. I've never watched it. It's just somewhere on our shelves.
they're I mean, effectively they're Rambo knockoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to kind of bring it, although I will say one neat thing about Lone Wolf McQuade is it's actually based around the story of an actual Texas Ranger, super duper duper loosely based. Okay, not it not really accurate at all, but there actually was a Texas Ranger with the moniker Lone Wolf, and so that's movie was loosely based on him.
Makes sense. Kind of like how
Yeah,
the Star Wars A New Hope with its main character Luke is loosely based off of the New Testament, which contains a book called Luke. So.
right. And I'm trying to find it's he was a Hispanic American. The Ranger is based on it.
All right.
And I can't anyway. I can't find his name right now.
We'll
So sorry about that. But to bring this back, since we mentioned Stallone, we talk about these other forgotten movies. Of course, Rocky IV, where he goes to Russia, is set during Christmas. Spencer over at Keep Off the Borderlands podcast would be happy to know that Brazil, because Spencer's a big Terry Gilliam fan, Brazil is set during Christmas.
One of Robert De Niro's best roles.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's Brazil's I don't know if it really hits my Christmas list, but it definitely is. I mean, and actually, there's a scene where you know Santa tortures somebody in Brazil. So, which I think you have one more pick, and then we'll come back to another movie I have that was that I got cut from my list, but it has some crazy Santa stuff in it.
Yep, it does, and I'm over here being happy about Brazil. So we will keep to message, and in the spirit in the spirit of continuing Christmas, in my now defunct film club, that is, I don't get to watch movies with my old bad movie buddies. One of our Christmas traditions, that was the film we watched one Christmas, and then they never watched movies with me again. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. Classic film with a massive 2-star rating on IMDb. 2 stars, sharing companies with films like Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas or Super Babies 2, Baby Geniuses, or Baby Geniuses 2, Super Babies. So the basic premise of this film, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, have you seen this one, Jason?
I have. Yes. Yeah, it's a classic.
Yep, beautiful. It's a 1964 classic film. The Martians kidnap Santa Claus because, lo and behold, the children of Mars have no Santa Claus to give them presents on Christmas Day. And it's up to 2 Earth children to fly up and save him. So, let's see. Do you want to know how the children get to Mars, what the Martian children look like, and whether or not Lord Kimar will release Santa Claus back to Earth in time to save Christmas? Looks like you'll have to get this direct to VHS release. That's a lie. It was not direct to VHS. That's just fun to say. You can watch it on Con TV. Sounds about right. I don't know what Con TV is, but you would have to definitely con me into watching it. It's there's a whole bunch of places you can get it, but you can rent it or buy it on Amazon. It's on Tubi. So that's where I would recommend doing it. Tubi is TubiTV.com or the Tubi app. I believe it is free to watch.
Yeah, it's also been covered on, and you can find this on a number of services. Elvira has done it before on her movie Macabre, where she inserts herself here and there in the movies, and Riff Tracks has covered it before, and as is Mystery Science Theater 3000. So you can find those versions out there as well.
So it's a good one if the Satellite of Love picked it up.
You'll probably cut this, which is fine, but just for completionist streak in myself to put out there, the Texas Ranger captain Lone Wolf McQuade was Manuel T. Gonzaullas, I guess that's how you say his last name.
Manuel T. Gonzaullas. Got it.
Yeah, there you go.
I will not cut that. I will leave that in.
Yeah, leave that in there.
I was tempted to say we could jump into the Santa Claus Conquers the Martians monologue, because I realize...
Yes.
We could jump into it so that you could look that guy up, because I think that's fair. I think that it's good information to have. So, let's see. Humorously, I noticed whenever I have guests on the show, I catch myself talking entirely too much. I like so the listeners are here to hear the guests, not to hear my boring old voice.
Well, and hopefully I'm not coming across too broken and stupid. It is pretty early in the morning, so
Yep, we are.
as we're recording.
Yeah, we are recording. We started recording around 4:30 this morning. So Jason wanted to sleep in, so we got started a little late. But it is, like I said, a nice and dark morning. So that joke, I probably should have explained that joke at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah, that's okay. It's one of those you know people have to think about for a minute. So
Yep, it does, or an hour as it may be. So that wraps up my picks. I went through Rare Exports, a special B movie in my heart because it was a gift from my wife that I did not seek out on my own. Emmett the Otter and A Muppet Christmas Carol, two classics, one of which I believe I actually got to see in theaters. Muppet Christmas Carol has been in a part of my life for almost as long as my little sister has been a part of my life. It came out in 1992, and so did she. And then Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, the 1965 special. Uh, so. So we made it through. We made it through what I had planned to talk about. We made it through some special other stuff. Jason, was there some more material or some other films you would like to pipe on right at the end?
well, I think I put a bunch in there. Of course, your other action ones we won't cover them in depth, but things like Cobra with Sylvester Stallone is a Christmas movie. There are a bunch of great ones out there, but I will plug one last one that almost made the list, and it got bumped out because I don't watch it every year. But that's Trancers. Now, Trancers is an '84 movie. This was a direct to VHS movie, and it was put out by Charles Band. And you may know Charles Band from things like Evil Dolls and Evil Toy or Dynamic Toys and Doll Man. Well, this stars Tim Thomerson as Jack Death. It also has a very young Helen Hunt in here. But the idea here is you have a policeman from the 23rd century, and they're having problems with this criminal called Whistler, who can mind control people and then effectively they turn into zombies. Well, he's found a way to project himself back into the past, into the 20th century. So Jack Death has to go back. And the way they do time travel in those movies is you don't physically travel back, but you take over the body of an ancestor. Your mind takes over the body of an ancestor, which is kind of fun.
Oh, kind of quantum, kind of a little bit of quantum leap going on.
Yeah, but they can get some physical objects back because he has a little bit of technology. He has he brings back his watch, which lets him do a long second, which stretches out time from 1 second, makes 1 second last 10 seconds, which is kind of fun. It's a kind of neat thing you can insert into your RPGs and your games. But
yeah, I forgot this is a gaming podcast.
Yeah, nominally, right?
Nominal.
Yeah, but so he goes back in time to fight him, and of course, this bad guy Whistler turns people to zombies in the modern day Los Angeles, and he's fighting them. But it's during Christmas, and there's a great scene where he has to fight a Santa Claus and do some other things, and I won't ruin it. But Trancers is actually a pretty good movie for the Charles Band's, for that group. It's Empire Pictures. It's one of their better movies, and it's got
real actors.
Yeah, it's got some real actors in there. Well, before they were actors, right? I mean, you could say that with like Leprechaun. It's got Jennifer Aniston before anybody knew who she was, but which is for a different holiday.
For a different holiday. So a little bit of fun trivia that I remember looking at Trancers. It got my attention. I have not seen this film, but the basic tagline is that time-traveling bounty hunter has to take out some zombie-like trance folk. And I was like, oh, I'm sold. I need this film in my life. But a little bit of trivia. Hap Ashby is a retired baseball player in the film. He's played by Biff Maynard, who was personally recommended by Tim Thomerson for the role to the director. But Mr. Maynard showed up on set blasted. He was drunk while he was playing the role, and there are scenes where Tim Thomerson has to manhandle him, and those are not acting. He is actually manhandling the character is manhandling the Hap Ashby character, but the actor Tim Thomerson is manhandling Biff Maynard, and the reason that that got into the film is because Biff was drunk enough that he didn't know where he was supposed to go on set.
Right. Yeah. And unlike some others, like say this has Santa Claus, it also has like a little Three Wise Men scene in there and some other things. So this actually has more Christmas than a lot of the quote unquote Christmas movies do. Believe it or not. It's just a fun film, and it's better quality than a lot of these direct to VHS movies were. I mean, don't get your expectations too high, but it's definitely worth watching. There's like 9 more Transfer movies. I don't know if they're all worth. Well, I have seen them all, but I wouldn't say they're all worth watching. But I would say the first one is worth watching.
Yep, it is. Trancers also released as Future Cop. The first one is worth watching. You can do. Yep. If I ever make a tagline, or if I ever make a movie, Jason, you get to do my taglines.
There we go.
Clerics Wear Ringmail, the movie. It's almost worth watching.
Yeah. There's so many. Yeah, you might like it. There are so many movies we could talk about, but I think we've maybe brought up a couple things that listeners haven't seen, hopefully, and given them a couple things to track down.
Yep, giving them a couple things to track down and giving them a bit to listen to. So I do want to thank you, Jason, for coming on. Thank you for sharing the experience with me and sharing some of these movies that I had not seen that I get to track down myself. And thank you for putting up with my crazy schedule. This was supposed to have been recorded and released. I think actually, truthfully, it's coming out at the right time. But we were supposed to record this last week. But I've had a bit of a hard time with work and life lately. My twins are... It is busy season where I work, but on top of it, my boys are potty training and giving their mom a hard time. She can't chase them around because she has a bit of extra weight going on into the 3rd trimester. So I'm having to do a lot more at home. So Jason, I want to say thank you for putting up with my insane schedule to get together and get this recorded.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to do it.
Yep. I had a lot of fun, and hopefully, you guys, the listeners, you had a lot of fun too. Happy Christmas.
Yep. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Theme music used for the Clerics Wear Ringmail podcast is adapted from Pursuing Darkness by artist X.K.Rux, released into the public domain and made available on freemusicarchive.org. Sound effects used in the making of this product retrieved from mixkit.co, used under the Mixkit sound effects free license, or from soundj.com and used in accordance with the soundj.com terms of use. Segments recorded within a vehicle are recorded using a Bluetooth hands-free device in conjunction with local vehicular safety legislation. The Clerics Wear Ringmail podcast is an independently owned and operated product released for educational and informative purposes under the Totally Steal This license, which is kind of like Creative Commons, except licensing. Clerics Wear Ringmail does not ascribe to nor endorse views or opinions expressed by call-ins, guests, or even the host, unless you think they're awesome, and thus does not assume any liability regarding the consumption or distribution of this podcast. By listening to the Clerics Wear Ringmail podcast, you agree to the provided term. Parties with questions regarding these terms, conditions, or releases are encouraged to reach out to Clerics Wear Ringmail at the prescribed methods provided on the Clerics Wear Ringmail blog. Parties dissatisfied with these terms, conditions, or releases are encouraged to go suck an egg.